Hello, Prestige heads, and welcome to American Prestige Q&A session. I'm Daniel Bessner. I went formal again. Should be Danny Bessner. Here, as always, with my friend and comrade Derek Davison, and we are excited to bring you the Q&A session. But before we do, I just wanted to thank everyone for rating and reviewing us on iTunes. We've gotten a bunch new ratings and reviews, and it actually really helps with the show. So if you haven't done so already, please go and do that. Of course, please also subscribe to the YouTube. This is going to be a permanent feature of the show, and we really want to get the gospel of prestige out there. So send it to friends and let everyone know the work we're doing. Okay, so we've been answering a lot of big think questions recently, and we thought we'd dive into the foreign policy weeds on this Q&A. And it's going to be a Derek heavy one, and the people have demanded it. So here we go. So the question comes from Nate, our AP tech support on our Discord. And remember, you could ask us questions when you subscribe to the show and go to our Discord and go to the Q&A station. And we want to thank Nate. At least let's take this opportunity to thank Nate for all the work that he's done on behalf of the show. We really, really appreciate it. And we're going to repay you. I think, honestly, Derek, this is a repayment in spades by answering your question. So let's begin. Nate says, a question for at Derek FX, which is Derek's Discord name. I've been thinking a lot about the general unwillingness of countries like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Jordan to intercede on behalf of Palestine, despite popular support for the Palestinian people. Is this something primarily driven by oil politics and the economic benefit of Israeli Arab normalization, or are there other factors at play? So, Derek, what do you think about this as an expert in the region? What do you think is driving this? I guess maybe I'll give my quick 2 cents. It does seem like, yeah, I don't think these countries really do care about Palestine, except insofar as they think it might be an destabilizing issue on the domestic political front, and that they're most concerned with maintaining good relations with the U.S., and that means ultimately maintaining positive relationships, at least in the medium and long term, with Israel. But as someone who actually knows about this, what do you think?
I mean, yeah, you have to understand that when you talk about popular support for the Palestinian people and then single out three of the least popularly accountable governments in the world, certainly in the Arab world, but in the world in general, you're talking about Egypt, which is essentially a military dictatorship, and two absolute monarchies. um, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to talk about popular support. I mean, it's there. Certainly, there is a popular sentiment across the Arab world in support of the Palestinian people, but the rulers of these states have other priorities that go well beyond the Palestinians, or in many respects are in conflict with the Palestinians. This is a region that is still heavily colonialized in the sense that you've got governments that were either installed in the case of uh, Jordan. I mean, the Hashemite monarchy has been in place since the end of World War One, virtually since the Mandate period when the British installed the Hashemites, installed a branch of the Hashemites on the throne of Transjordan. You've got the Saudis who have been uh, are not so much dependents of the U.S. anymore, but have historically for decades been dependents in the United States in terms of defense, and are now fully invested in the sort of economic architecture of oil and petrodollars, and the framework that the United States brings to the Middle East. And yes, China is a bigger player these days, and that changes the calculus for Saudi Arabia somewhat, but not that much. The Egyptian government, the question cites a piece at Middle East Eye that goes into some detail about Gamal Abdel Nasser and his challenge to this order, his challenge to the post-colonial order, or the colonial order, if you will, of the region. But the successive Egyptian leaders who followed him, Anwar Sadat and Hosni Mubarak, turned Egypt into a full-on dependency of the United States. The Jordanian monarchy is, in many respects, a full-on dependency of the United States. The U.S. supports these countries with huge amounts of aid that sustain them, despite not a whole lot of popular purchase among the Egyptian and Jordanian publics. And Israel Palestine is sort of where the rubber hits the road, right? It's sort of a soft remnant of colonialism in these other parts of the Middle East and in the Arab world in particular. But Israel Palestine is where you still have full blown colonial state meets indigenous population on the ground. And it's not terribly surprising in that light that there is a lot of popular support for the Palestinians who are viewed as resistance to a Western order that has not treated the Arab world particularly well. But it's also not surprising that you have these monarchies, or in the case of Egypt, again, essentially a military government, even more so since 2013, but prior to that as well, that relies heavily on the U.S. for support, for military funding, for basic aid and financial support. That these countries, governments, unrepresentative governments, would be more interested in making nice with the United States than they are in responding to their publics, or feel more pressured, I guess, let's say, to make nice with the United States than to respond to their publics. It's not that they don't it's not that they completely dismiss popular sentiment. I think part of the reason that Mohammed bin Salman, for example, who's maybe the most secure of the three leaders of the three countries in this question, I don't think maybe, definitely more secure than the Jordanian monarchy, definitely more secure, I think, than Abdel Fattah Sisi. Nevertheless, won't go forward with, won't take the step that other monarchs in the region, like the Emiratis and the Bahrainis, have done to normalize relations with Israel and throw the Palestinians under the bus. Because in Saudi Arabia, he feels, at least at that farthest extent of the issue, feels vulnerable to popular backlash, and so he won't go to that degree. But beyond that, like, yeah, these guys are really, their constituent is the United States. It's not the people that they're ostensibly governing or ruling. They are far more susceptible to pressure from Washington than they are from the so-called street, the Arab street, whatever you want to call it.
So I have a question. How is this? I mean, I think I've said it before in a couple of pods. Like, this is still shaking out the Ottoman Empire. Where do you see this going? Because I think a lot of analysts of the Middle East have always said this nation state formation doesn't quite make sense. This is why you have a lot of basically city state formations in the UAE and whatnot. And the United States' power is not only in relative decline, the country is just less interested in the Middle East. And I think will just become less interested in the Middle East for a variety of reasons going forward. Where do you see the politics in the region going now, 14 years after the so-called Arab Spring, which was a big seemed like a big moment, even though I think a lot of things have kind of gone back to the status quo-ish position. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we're a century out, effectively, more than a century at this point from Sykes-Picot, and I think it's past the point where
Why
you
don't you
could
tell
talk
people what
about,
Sykes-Picot
like,
is? They might
oh,
not
well,
know.
I mean, the agreement between the French and British after World War One to carve up the Arab domains of the Ottoman Empire, and they sort of famously drew a line on a map and said everything north of this will be French and everything south of this will be British. And that was the extent of the thought they really put into it. I think we're past the point where you could really talk about changing national boundaries, or redrawing the map of the region. I think that these things are locked into place, and at the very least, to attempt anything like that, as Joe Biden famously suggested, we should carve Iraq up into three countries, would be disastrous. I mean, it would lead to wars. It would lead to overlapping claims on resource heavy areas or important cities. It would just be a chaotic mess. So we probably shouldn't even entertain the idea of that kind of thing happening. That said, some of these countries I don't think can survive without a heavy United States presence and heavy United States backing in the forms that they survive today. I don't think the Jordanian monarchy will be able to last if the United States is not there propping it up, and that's for a variety of reasons. But it's not terribly wealthy. It's not terribly popular. It grows less and less popular every time some atrocity happens to the Palestinians, because the Jordanian monarchy is essentially complicit in atrocities that happen to the Palestinians, given its relationship with Israel. And so, yeah, I feel like they're quite vulnerable to a world where the United States is no longer a major player. And if they found another patron, that would be one thing. But who's that going to be? It's Jordan. I don't know how much to the extent that the United States cares about stability in Jordan. It's to protect Israel. It's to shield Israel. So yeah, I think that's one country that definitely could be in for a reckoning. There are other countries in the region we haven't talked about whose political stability I think should be questioned. Bahrain, where you have a Sunni monarchy ruling over a predominantly Shia population and brutalizing them in the process. Not hugely stable. They're stable because the Saudis make sure that they're stable. But in a world where the U.S. isn't backing the Saudis have to go someplace else or start to founder a little bit. You could see a shift in that country. Lebanon, I think, it just is an impossible mess to try and iron out, and I don't really know how that's gonna play out. But the stability there is not good either, obviously. So yeah, I do think you could have some severe upheavals in a number of these states. Egypt is even a possibility. I mean, we saw how easily the Mubarak government fell to a couple of weeks of popular uprising, and that was reversed. It was reversed in part because the United States wanted it to be reversed, but the appetite is clearly there for a more representative government, and certainly you could see change happen there as well. But it would take another thing on the order of the Arab Spring, and then it would take the rest of the world kind of butting out and letting people determine for themselves what kind of government they want, which we're not
I don't
very
like
good
that.
at. Yeah, nobody
Uh,
likes that.
Maybe Derek, final question. Do you see, I mean, I'm going to say Russia, but I don't think Russia. Do you think Russia or China have an interest in this region in a way about being a patron to some of the countries, or not
I
really?
don't. I really don't. I think China. I mean, China. The Chinese leaders are not dumb. Like they've watched the United States try to play nursemaid in this part of the world for the last 50 years, and the headache that's been, especially since the end of the Cold War. Russia, I don't think has any interest. The only thing they want is stability in the oil market, which they have to deal with the Saudis to get. But I don't think they have much interest apart from that, and maybe selling weapons. They don't have the interest, and I don't think the capacity really to be that involved in the politics of the region. But China is the big question. And no, I think what the Chinese government wants is again sort of quiet, make sure the oil's flowing, no trouble with anybody. They don't want to take on the role of the United States where we're kind of forming up teams and picking sides and arming and arming fine. They'll sell weapons to anybody, but not where we're kind of building anti-Iran alliances and kind of managing countries. That just I think to them they view that as a headache, and rightly so. Uh, which I think ironically for the region, maybe not ironically, but for the region, I think is maybe a better way to be, and maybe a better way to exist is under a world where China is, instead of picking sides, it's brokering, diplomatic deals between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and letting those countries kind of deal with themselves and deal with their own problems without being pulled in one direction or another. I think that's probably a better way for that region to exist. If the United States allows it to be that way, but that's not necessarily going to happen.
Well, Derek, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please review the pod, subscribe on YouTube, all those good things. And we love you both. We love you both, all you two listeners. We love you all. And we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
That's